Welcome, welcome, welcome to Biz Dev Live. My name is Cameron Toth. I am so excited to be bringing you David Siegel, the CEO of Meetup. He was the CEO of Investopedia. I am so excited to be talking to you about being decisive today, making those decisions that are going to benefit you and the people around you and getting on it, right? We don't want paralysis by analysis. We want to move forward, and we want to move forward in a strong way that is getting us towards our goals. We're going to dig deep on that topic today. Stay with me. We'll be right back after the Biz Dev Live theme.
Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time, live. Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time. Leadership and motivation, empathy and inspiration, Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live, business development, not even selling it. Biz D with C, brought to you by Cameron T. Biz D with C, brought to you by Cameron T. This is business development, not even selling it. This is business development, not even selling it. Business development, not even selling it. Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live. This is business development, not even selling it.
So shout out to my power players in the comments. We got Yolanda checking in. We got Alexandria Rosa checking in from Ohio. Yolanda, let me know. I don't want to mess it up. Tell everybody where you're tuning in from. David Siegel is the CEO of Meetup, the largest platform for finding and building local communities. He has 25 years of experience as a technology and digital media executive, leading organizations through innovative product development, rapid revenue growth, and digital traffic acceleration. Prior to joining Meetup, David was CEO of Investopedia. Wow, I got to work on that pronunciation. Investopedia. And before that, president of Seeking Alpha. David holds a BA in philosophy, politics, and economics, and an MBA from the University of Pennsylvania. He's an adjunct professor at Columbia University, where he teaches strategic planning and entrepreneurship, my entrepreneurs. He is the author of Decide and Conquer, 44 Decisions That Make or Break All Leaders, and hosts the podcast Keep Connected, which is dedicated to the power of community. Please connect with him on LinkedIn. I'm so excited to bring you Mr. David Siegel. Thank you for being on the show.
Woo! What an intro. Love it. Love the energy of the music. It's freaking awesome.
Thank you, David. Thank you. And Alexandria is pumped up today. She loves being decisive and taking action. So let's jump into this. How are you helping people right now as CEO of Meetup?
Okay. So Meetup's goal is nothing less than curing the loneliness epidemic, which is a big, lofty goal. 46% of people regularly, not sometimes, not occasionally, but regularly feel lonely. And among people who are Gen Zers, it's as high as 62% of people regularly feel lonely. Really terrifying statistics. When you have loneliness, you have anxiety, you have depression, you have, God forbid, self-harm or any other kinds of things that can happen from loneliness. Our goal at Meetup is to help people find communities. We have 257,000 communities around the world, and be a small step, but even a larger step in building the loneliness epidemic in the 193 countries that we are in. That's my 30 seconds of what I try to do every day.
I love it. And I'm reading Never Eat Alone right now. And the idea of, you want to be successful in life, but you also want to just bring people in. And so I love that he was talking about, meeting with people over a workout. And so that's not a place that you typically think, oh, let me invite somebody in to see the sweaty. But, if you're maximizing your time and getting real and creating bonds and relationships with people, what better way, right? So great book.
Everything's better when you do it with people. Everything is better. Whether you're working out with people. If you're going for a run, running with people, like everything. Not to say that you need to be with people all the time, because that's burnout, but trying to find all the different ways in your life to share an amazing experience better with people, and also share a challenging or difficult experience also better with people, the joys and the sorrows.
Yeah, I think I'm going to put a pin on this, but talking about the shift, as we're kind of not necessarily post-pandemic, but over it pandemic, basically.
We're getting there.
The idea that people are sort of shirking, virtual in favor of in person just tells you how much people really want to be together, want that personal connection. They want the hugs. They want the high fives. It's great getting information online, but I want to meet people, right? So it's such a big deal. So talk to me about what little David Siegel wanted to be when he was growing up. I can't imagine at 5 years old, you were thinking, I'm going to go get, a BA in philosophy and politics. I'm going to go be a CEO of a online information, conglomerate, and then, be a CEO of this solving humanities community problem, right? Talk to me about what kind of influences you grew up, what your parents did, how that impacted you. I'd love to hear the whole story.
Okay. Wow. Sure. Yeah. I was not the Alex P. Keating, if you remember that from the TV show Family Ties, where from a young age,
I was when I
was
saw
not
Michael J. Fox, I was like, I was all in, right?
I was not that. I was not like wearing the tie and wanting to be, Warden was my middle name when I was 5 years old in playgroup. I was actually, Cameron, really quite shy, lacked confidence as a kid. During kind of like early 10 to 12 years old, 6th grade, 7th to 8th grade, I was very shy, always around girls. And that was like a big thing, obviously, for so many people, in the middle school years. And I was even bullied actually at times because I was so shy. I was always like a nice person and never wanted to do anything that wasn't nice to other people. But it was very hard at times. Because I didn't really have my community, I didn't really have my people for a long time, and at the time, I didn't appreciate how important community really kind of was to me. I grew up, and I still am a part of an Orthodox Jewish community, and seeing how impactful community was growing up. So if God forbid someone passed away, our community, food will be brought to them. Breakfast, lunch, dinner for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. No one ever had to worry about, those kind of things. People would drive their kids to carpools. There was just a lot of things that our community did to support it. And times of joy and times of happiness, someone had a baby. Again, lots of food was brought, to people's help to help them out during, the joys and during the sorrows. So I grew up in a very, very, very strong, close, supportive community, which was extremely meaningful and impactful for my life. My parents, my father was a neurologist, so that's focused on the brain, and my mom was a psychologist, also focusing on the brain. So we had kind of the physical brain and the psychological brain kind of well taken care of between my two parents. And my dad worked very, very hard in building a complete new practice from the ground up. He was a real entrepreneur. He built something from nothing to be the largest neurological practice in the state of Connecticut, actually, before passing away about close to 10 years ago. And he always would talk about business and talk about kind of building a business and growing a business. And that also had an impact on me, as did being shy have an impact on me, as did community building also have an impact on me. Fast forward, when I went to college, I really wanted to make the world a bit. I always cared about like having a contribution to this world. It wasn't about making as much money as possible that I could. It was about how do you have a positive impact. So actually, when I was in college, my first internship while working was for a nonprofit. And I said, okay, I could see myself like running a nonprofit one day and going up the ranks in a nonprofit, because nonprofits do lots of good. I worked for a nonprofit. And I hated it. I just, for some reason, that particular nonprofit, the people were like mailing it in. They weren't ambitious. They were very frustrated all the time. I was like, nonprofit, that's not for me. And then I became
sometimes things aren't moving as fast as you want.
Correct.
The way that you see them. Yeah, absolutely.
Like I was at the time ambitious and efficient and organized, want to have an impact and drive. I was always very driving and focused, but the nonprofit didn't have that kind of culture, and some nonprofits do perhaps, but many don't. So I knew that wasn't the path for me. And then I was actually went to become a Hebrew school teacher, and I taught while I was in college teaching Hebrew school. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be a teacher, and that's the way I can help the world, and that would be really meaningful, because nothing better than teaching and teaching children. And maybe I become a rabbi. Who the heck knew? And that also was really stressful. I did not enjoy teaching, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds. It didn't resonate for me. Then finally, by my sophomore year, I applied to as many different internships in consulting that I could apply for. I applied to 50 different summer internships in consulting, and I got rejected by all 50 different places. I plastered my college dorm walls with all my rejection letters. And then one place said to me, "Hey, we got your resume from another location, and you're the only person that applied." And it was William Mercer, which is a large human resource consulting firm. And I was like, okay. And because I was the only person applied, I got the job. So I got lucky. I literally mailed envelopes, and this is in 1994, 1995.
And let me say this, because my 14-year-old yesterday comes in and he says, "I ran for treasurer and I got it because no one else ran."
Sometimes just showing up.
And I was telling him, I want you to count this as a huge win, because later in life, in politics, in a lot of other things, you're going to find out if you run for it, if you apply for it, you may not have any competition because nobody was bold enough. No one was audacious enough to apply. Get it out there. And I think that's a huge lesson for everybody watching. Just get it done.
Thank you for the call. And I would say the other kind of lesson for me, and I do this a lot in my life and for successes, is I'm a big believer that kind of volume and kind of large volume activities can potentially drive all these optionality, meaning all these different options can happen, and luck happens as a result of high volume of activities.
Yes.
So I didn't apply to 1 or 2 consulting firms. I got a list from a friend of mine.
And in sports, we call this shots on goal, right?
Yes, exactly. You got to. So I took, when everyone else was applying to I'm only going to apply to McKinsey. I'm only going to apply to whatever, BCG. I was like, I'm going to get a list of all 50. I'm going to apply to all 50 consulting firms, because that's the list that I got. I'm going to send the exact same letter, all 50. And I got lucky. Because my previous experience was like almost nothing before that. So, you could engineer luck. And in the book, I talk about this quite a bit, about how can you make decisions, which we'll get to later on, of course. How do you make decisions that can actually drive you to become luckier and have lucky things end up happening? And that's kind of the story of my life. Exactly, Alexandra. I love what you're putting there. Volume equals options. It really does matter. So I did that, and it was in human resource consulting. And then when I graduated from college, I got 4 jobs, which is pretty good. 1997, all 4 jobs were in human resource consulting. And I worked for a human resource consulting firm. We just actually had an anniversary. I hadn't seen people in 20 years. It was really wonderful. But I took that job. I rejected big name places like Deloitte Consulting and Towers Parent Consulting, all these big name consulting firms, to work for a very small boutique shop. And the reason I chose that very small boutique shop was because they said to me, "You are going to get direct client exposure day one. You're going to meet with as many, every time we have a client meeting, you're going to be joined. You're not going to be some person in the background just doing.
You're not going to be ground to a small nub at Deloitte, doing all the stuff that everybody else doesn't want to do to earn your come up. Yeah.
Exactly. And just work on PowerPoint decks in the background and not be in the forefront. And they said, and we've never hired someone from undergraduate before. You're going to be the first undergraduate hire we've ever made. We only hired MBA students in the past. I'm like, and we're going to treat you just like that, except we're not going to pay you the same amount. Like, no problem. Great. And I did that for 2 years. And the biggest client that I had was a company called DoubleClick. Now, at the time, DoubleClick in the late 90s was the internet company. It was the largest internet advertising company. It was the company that made the internet free. Literally, the internet free was because of advertising, and DoubleClick was the backbone of advertising It ultimately got sold to Google for like $3 billion. And it's actually known as that's one of the best deals Google ever got, because Google has made hundreds of billions of dollars off of that acquisition since then. And I became a human resource partner. I worked in human resources, again, people-based, because I deeply always believed, and again, that was kind of lucky that I ended up in the people field and the human resource field, but I was just deeply believe in the power of people. And I remember one time the CEO of DoubleClick, Kevin Ryan, came over to me and he said, David, what do you work on? And I said, well, I work on how do you recruit top talent to our company? How do you motivate people? How do you manage people effectively? How do you align kind of infrastructure and processes, the operations of the business from a people perspective? He's like, dude, that's like what I do every day as a CEO. And I'm like, maybe I could be a CEO one day.
I love that. I love that.
Because this really, like, CEOs spent a tremendous amount of their time on people-based work, on hiring top people, on sometimes firing people if you need to do that, on communications, on all hands meetings, on team meetings, on board meetings. All of it is like very people-centered. And then I actually got an offer.
And I'll just say, add a little spice there, right? If people, I mean, and we hear this, people drive your company forward. People are the product, right? People are the driving core of your business. People are, right? We hear that, and sometimes it's tough to understand that because, well, isn't it the widgets? Isn't it the iPhones? Isn't it this that drives your company forward? But if you don't have the people making sure that they're looking over the quality, and if you don't have the people making sure that they're looking over the marketing, and if you don't have everybody on the same page, well, then the marketing isn't in line with what the product development is. And I don't care if it's, I run a staffing company. I don't care if it's, making sure the uniforms are correct and people are treated well, or, you're running factories in Shanghai. The principle is the same. You're putting those people in place. And I love that piece of it, because you have that idea of, it's making sure you're like chief, like the people have these funny titles these days, but some of them are pretty good. Chief communicator, right? Those kind of things.
Yeah.
I think
a CEO is a chief communicator in many ways. It's totally, Cameron. I love what you're saying. People, products aren't built, people build products. Decisions aren't made, people make decisions. Like, everything comes down to taking care of your people. And what you say is, you take care of your people then take care of your customers. And Jim Collins, famous business writer and other writer generally, always talks about first who, then what, and building a team and figuring out what you want to do. You have to have the right people in place, and then you can figure out what to do. But you don't start focusing on the what and the strategy and the execution without the right team in place. All about the people. So I knew that from an early age. I was always advising people who had 10 years, 15 years experience more than me on like how to manage people effectively. I'm not sure. I think because I was younger and bullied a bit, I was kinder and therefore more empathetic to other people's challenges. And I think emotional intelligence is frankly more important than general intelligence when it comes to business and leadership. And I think from an earlier age, I was able to build that both from my parents and also just from kind of life circumstances. So I think it's served me well, through the years. I was offered a job at DoubleClick to leave human resources because I knew I wanted to then at DoubleClick. I heard the CEO told me this, Kevin Ryan, and I said, that's it. I want to become a CEO. What do I need to do? So I knew I had to leave that, and I was offered a job to become like a business development manager, get paid at the time, which is an insane amount of money, like close to $200,000 of total salary. A lot of money. Still a lot of money now, but a lot of money certainly for a, my gosh, 26-year-old at the time. And the other option was to go to business school. So I decided to apply to business school, applied to only a couple of top places, got into Wharton, and I made the decision to forego a very large salary, a salary much larger than the average salary for a Wharton graduate, to go to business school, even though my wife just had a kid, and we went from 2 salaries for 2 people. My wife and I just had a kid, I should say, not just my wife, and to no salary for 3 people, essentially for 2 years. So I did that during business school.
And talk to me about that, right? So that's a crazy decision, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure the wife was like, what are you thinking right now? What's going on? Why do you need this? Somebody's offering you money. You don't need to go get an education. I know I got that, always struggle because I didn't finish my education. So it's like, I don't want to stop what I'm doing because then, the income's going to stop and go get the education. Why did you do this?
Yeah. So a couple of reasons. Number one is I have always, from a young age, and hopefully I wasn't cocky, not from a young age, actually. Once I hit college, I started to have a lot of confidence in myself and my abilities to ultimately succeed. So that meant that I was willing to take a lot more risks than many other people. Because if you lack confidence, oftentimes you're less comfortable taking risks. And it was a big risk to forego a big salary for a couple of years. But I figured my mentors at DoubleClick, a guy named David Rosenblatt, who's now on the board of Twitter, so he's having an interesting experience there as a CEO of First Dibs. He was my mentor, and this other person, Kevin Rose, was a mentor, and another person, Jeff Epstein. There's all these pretty well-known people in the tech industry were executives at DoubleClick and were my mentors. And every single one of them had an MBA from a top business school. Every one of them, like the entire DoubleClick leadership team, all in MBAs from top business schools. And that was what I knew. So because that was kind of what I knew it was important. My wife was completely, enormously supportive of it. And I just took out massive loans, and that was it. I took out $150,000 in student loans, which is a lot. I actually am still paying back the student loans. I haven't paid it back. I'm at 47 years old.
All right. And so the next
question loans for my kids and for myself.
And so the next question has to be, well, was it worth it?
Oh, definitely. And here's why. A couple of reasons. Number one is most of the time when people go to business school, they have a really strong foundation in business prior. They worked in investment banking. They might have worked in, financial consulting, manufacturing consulting, operations consulting. They really understood business. I understood people, which is really valuable to becoming a CEO. I understood kind of organizational structures and how organizations work, but I did not know finance. I did not know accounting. I did not know statistics. I didn't know marketing. I didn't know any of those kind of really important functions in business. And I didn't understand business models like at all. So I chose the company, the university that was the most analytically rigorous, most finance focused, because I felt like I needed to learn finance and learn business. Well, everyone else was going out like partying and having fun. Like I was like studying. I had a kid. I did meet friendships and made relationships, and I'm close to a whole bunch of people today. But I was not like partying. I was very, very focused because I was paying for myself. My parents didn't help me pay for college, but they did not pay for graduate school. That was all on me. So when you have that kind of situation, you take it seriously. And I took it super seriously. I learned a tremendous amount. I met great people during that process as well. And it gave me a lot of confidence to be able to be successful. And still today, 47, whatever, many years later, people are like, oh, you went to Wharton Business School. Okay, check or something. And I do believe that for numerous jobs that I had, it gives you this or job interviews, this, oh, wow, okay, you went to this place, that helps you. So it was definitely not something I regret at all. Careers are long, life is long. It worked out fine. And fortunately, I just, kept taking out loans after business school to pay back my business school loans at kind of lower rates. So I got a house and I only paid 4% interest on the house, and I used that money to pay back a bunch of my, 7 and 8% business school loans. So I was paying a lot of like, the low interest rate game. And I'm still paying back loans today, which is absolutely amazing as a CEO 25 years later. But definitely the right decision. Definitely the right decision. It was gutsy, but I think,
and I as I go through my days, and you're doing business and everything seems so important and critical, and you're going to put out the next fire, whether that's something involving the children, the spouse, the business, the banking situation. This, you're always, life can just feel tedious and like why you're doing this. And so I love the perspective, if you're looking long term. And I think a fellow Wharton graduate, right? Warren Buffett, right?
Yep.
Am I right in that? Right. Yep. So it's so interesting. And I've mentioned it before on this show, but looking at things the long-term way. And I remember at the beginning of the pandemic and a lot of the tech stocks were taken off and things that, Warren Buffett wasn't interested in, and you're looking at crypto and, the comments and, Warren is falling off. But that long-term perspective, going back to the basics, understanding that, having a good foundation is never a bad investment. Investing in yourself is never a bad investment. Of course, you want to do it strategically. Of course, you want to do it in a way that you feel is going to most benefit you. You don't want to feel regret because you made the decision too fast with not enough information. But once you decide that something is good for you and that it means something and it matters, you make that decision, right? We're going to talk about that today, making those decisions and move on. So I love the fact that you did it. And so talk to me, you went to Wharton Business School. How did the opportunities to become a CEO actually happen for you? And what were some of those failures and lessons that you learned on the way?
Okay, sure. I'll tell you 2 stories. One's a good story, one's a failure story, and then I could share many more stories if you want in terms of the path. But good mentorship, hugely important. Agree, Yolanda, who wrote that in the chat. So the good story is upon graduating business school, I knew what I wanted to do. The best way to become a CEO is to sit at the foot of a CEO and to learn from a CEO. So I said, I want to become an assistant to the CEO, assistant to the chairman. I want to do PowerPoint decks. And there's like a role actually out there. Not many companies have it. Some do, where you're like the strategic assistant. You work on strategic planning, you work on special projects, whatever it is, but you work directly with the CEO and you learn everything from that person. So again, play the volume game. I reached out to, and this is crazy, but I sent overnight, I stayed up all night. I sent 1,000 emails out to 1,000 different C-level people and all the companies I was very interested in for whatever reason. I thought they did good, etc. I ended up speaking to.
And was this all emails that you had, or you gathered that? How did you go?
Yeah, because at one point I got access to a database of email address of names, just of names of all the executives. And then what I did is, I went on Google and I typed in I typed in at Meetup, D Siegel at Meetup, David_Siegel at Meetup, David.Siegel.me to find out what what the basis was for the email, whether it's first letter, last name, first name, dot, last name. So I found out from these about 100 companies and 10 executives of each company, the basis for how the email.
And I want to point out to people here, and this is something that I think people forget, right? They'll say, oh, I don't have that person's email.
Right.
And then
you can find anyone's email.
Into the game, right? And so it's not that complicated, right? It's not, but it may take a little lock unpicking. You actually, you don't have
about 30 seconds of checking.
Ready, so you gotta figure it out. And if you do, well, the opportunities start to come. I love it.
So I sent out 1,000 emails overnight. I ended up talking to the commissioner of the NBA, David Stern. I ended up emailing back and forth with Ken Chenault, who was the CEO of American Express. Got emails back from David Nealman, who was the CEO and founder of JetBlue, all these different things. Anyway, I talked to CEO of 1-800-Flowers, and I said to him, hey, I want to become your assistant, blah, blah. We ended up talking for half an hour. That was it. He said, no. I went to another company. I'll tell that after. And 3 years after I graduated, a friend of mine says, David, there was a post in a Wharton's alumni database, and you should check it out. It says 1-800-Flowers looking for an assistant to the CEO. And I was like, wow, that's cool. I talked to Jim McCann, the founder and CEO of 1-800-Flowers, 3.5 years ago. So I sent him a little note saying, hey, Jim, I see you posted for the Wharton alumni database, Wharton alumni, that you're looking for an assistant to the CEO. So he emailed me back 5 words. The 5 words were, I was looking for you. So
that's amazing.
Isn't that awesome? So in fact, he has a podcast. I was just on his podcast and I told that story. It was really special to kind of have that continued bonding. So I ended up working for 1-800-Flowers, not directly after business school. I actually accepted a job at Boston Consulting Group against my better judgment because I couldn't get any jobs outside after consulting. But then they gave me a start date 8 months later, I was like, what the hell am I supposed to do for 8 months? They're like, travel. I'm like, dude, I got a 2-year-old. I'm not traveling anywhere. I need money. I got like $200,000 in loans. So I went to the opposite of consulting. What was the opposite of consulting? It's like retail. It's like getting your fingernails dirty in like stores. So I went to, I also reached out to the CEO of Duane Reade, the pharmacy chain, and he let me do a 6-month internship before I would start working for BCG, Boston Consulting Group. And I start doing the internship, and then come 6 months, he's like, David, you're not going anywhere. I'm like, I'm not. He's like, no. So I called up Boston Consulting Group, and I said, I'm sorry, I'm rescinding my offer. 8 months was too long. I ended up working at this $1.7 billion kind of pharmacy chain. And he goes, how could you do that? You're never going to work in consulting again. That's terrible. I can't believe you did that. Oh, you're so, how could lack integrity. And then he said, where are you going to work?
Sir.
I said,
I completely understand. You're completely correct. Thank you very much.
I said, Duane Reade, $1.7 billion chain. And he goes, is there any chance you could give us business?
Oh,
right? I mean, that's the world, right? So I'm like, maybe if we weren't such a word, you know what I mean, beforehand. So
I think, and then just to shout this out, I mean, I talk about this with my staff, but in the moment, and it can be very frustrating. I mean, we're in an environment, we were talking before we jumped on about, my challenges with finding people. We got, more requests than ever before for staff. And it's so annoying because, we could potentially be busier than we've ever been, in 11 years of business. But we're sitting there saying no to people. Right. And it's such a challenge. And so, delaying your gratification, right? Being pissed off, but understanding, you might need this person down the line. There might be another opportunity with this person that that's awesome for that person. And, lesson learned, maybe not wait somebody, make somebody wait 8 months if you actually want them to work. I think about all the lessons that are learned each time I respond in a way that is less than ideal, less than providing less than the optimum outcome for the long-term vision, right?
Yeah, no, your reputation matters. People know your reputation. And, one of the principles I talk about in the book, which I'm sure at some point we'll get to, if not, that's also good. It's called Be Kind, which is just understanding that when you're kind, good things will happen. Not nice, but kind. And we can talk about the difference between nice and kind at some point later on, if it makes sense. But if you're an asshole, then it's going to come back to bite you. And everyone knows everything. And it's so important. The world that I'm in, the tech world that I'm in, it's amazing how incestuous it is. And your reputation really matters tremendously, tremendously, tremendously. Mistakes that I made have come back to hurt me. Speaking of mistakes, I'll share one last mistake, and then we can, fast forward through the rest part. The big mistake that I made was right after business called working at Duane Reade. Since we're talking about Duane Reade, I desperately wanted to build a big business. We came up with this incredible new innovation in pharmacy, which is rather than going to a pharmacy, dropping up for prescription, having to wait online, go back again, wait online, pick it up, very inefficient process. We started something called Duane Reade Express. This was back in now 2004. And it was an opportunity for people to, we put kiosks in hospitals, in physician offices, in companies, and they would scan their prescription and would connect to a pharmacist via video conferencing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There was a bed of Duane Reade pharmacists sitting in the basement of a store. And then we would deliver the script back to people. So it was big innovation. The problem was the technology was way ahead of its time. There was no Zoom back then in 2004. Video conferencing was really nascent. And it didn't work. Like, it worked, but it just kept breaking down constantly. We were just breaking down everywhere. But I kept building more, building more, building more, building more. We had 200 of these kiosks all around. We're doing $20 million in revenue in like 1 year. I was like, yeah, I had 50 employees. I was so excited. But I knew it was kind of like in a house of cards, preparing me for when I would be working for WeWork, kind of the house of cards there. And ultimately it blew up. New CEO came and shut the business down. And and ultimately the failure there was a complete failure by me, which was driven by ego, was driven by doing what was best for me, not what was best for the business. And ultimately everything comes back to haunt you. And that's when I got the
David, hustle harder. I love the documentary on Apple TV with WeWork. You mentioned WeWork. Talk to us a little bit about WeWork before we get into your takeaways here.
Yeah, sure. So WeWork, So after when I Flowers, I worked for a bunch of companies and worked for as the CEO of Investopedia. Sold the company, very successful sale, about 4 to 5x return for employees, for myself, investors, etc. I was going to just chill for a while. I needed a break. I had worked like basically straight 20 straight years without a month of a break. I got a call from someone who was on the board of a previous company when I was president of Seeking Alpha. And he said, David, you are the people person. You are the community person. You need to work for Meetup and you need to start immediately. And I was like, I just sold a company. Like my brain is fried. And he's like, no, you have to work for Meetup. I'm introducing you to Adam Newman. You know, if anyone here watched, we crashed. The only thing that's not true about the show is that it didn't go to enough of an extent of how crazy things actually were.
I think they wanted to try to make it believable, and I think and so
the truth was less believable. The truth was less believable.
It's so interesting because you go through things, and I know I have staff in my office shaking their heads like somebody did that, right? And so that's kind of what we were up against when you're creating something. It's like, no, nobody's going to believe that that's what happened, right?
Correct. Again, I could tell stories about things that are crazier than even those in the movie. So, and in the book, there's a bunch of those stories, and they're entertaining. Met Adam, can tell stories about my interview with Adam also, but ultimately 27 interviews later, I kid you not.
27?
27 interviews. I met with every person at WeWork. I met with Adam a couple of times, met with Artie Minson, the president of WeWork, met with the chief operating officer of WeWork, met with the head of product for WeWork. I met with a couple of people multiple times, met with the whole executive team, the co-founder of WeWork.
And what was the role? 27 interviews for what?
Right. It was to become the CEO of Meetup. So WeWork owned Meetup. So okay. WeWork had acquired Meetup 6 months prior in early 2018. And there was a founder, his name is Scott Heiferman, an incredible, amazing person. And they basically decided Scott wasn't the person that they wanted to lead Meetup in the future, even though he'd been running the company, quite well for 16 years. And they needed to look for a new head of Meetup. And unfortunately, Adam had promised Scott that if he ever did that, he would tell Scott to his face and let him know. Scott ended up finding out from a recruiter who reached out to a friend and that they were looking for a CEO of Meetup. And he's like, I can't believe that this is how I'm finding out about it. So, I'm now taking over the first outside CEO, taking over for, Scott's baby, justifiably his teenage baby. And so because of that, after meeting with like 15 people at WeWork, I now had to resell myself to everyone at Meetup and meet with everyone in their executive team and 12 more people, over at Meetup. It was Scott once and he wasn't sold to me. Then I met with Scott twice. He wasn't sold to me. Then I met with Scott the third time. We spent a whole day together because again, this is his baby, right? So I get it. So we spent a whole day together going from Meetup group to Meetup group to Meetup group. And he was pretty much sold on me. Then he said,
and I got to ask, like, what at this point, I mean, I don't know how many.
I'm like, this is effed up.
But you lasted through 27 interviews. A lot of people, I mean, I have trouble today getting people to show up for one interview. You went to 27.
Yeah, none on Zoom. There was no Zoom back then. So like I had to schlep into the city every day, back and forth. Oh, that wasn't fun. But
what was your motive? What was the thing that was driving you that was saying this is going to be worth it?
I think there was a good thing driving and a bad thing driving, right? So the good thing driving me, there were two good things driving me. One ended up being totally false. The good thing that was true was I really believed in Meetup's mission. I really believed in community building and the loneliness epidemic. I had been going to Meetup events for a decade plus and just absolutely loved what we do as a business. And it was extremely important to me to work for a company that I deeply believed in its mission. That was like the end all be all. I was not going to work for something like B2B SaaS business to sell whatever, who knows what software. That's like completely less interesting to me. So that was very motivating to me and I wanted to keep going. So that was good. The second thing was I wanted to get on like the WeWork Kool-Aid gravy train. And like, I believed everything that all the people from WeWork were telling me. I didn't have.
And so as crazy as this guy is, right? As crazy as the stories that are shown on the TV and crazy as the stories that were beyond, there's a genius to it, right? And I'm not
Genius.
saying to people to go out and copy the Adam Newman playbook, but I think it's of the same frame. We can look at some incredibly nasty individuals in history. We can look at there's something to take away, right? And I think that's something that's really important. And when you talk about be kind, right? There's always a good aspect. It may be hard to find sometimes, but there's always something good to take away from the situation.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think that's really important.
Adam really wanted to change the world, by the way. Like Adam really, really believed he was making the world a better place. How he went about doing it, very questionable, but he deeply believed in WeWork's mission.
Hustle hard, right? Yes, absolutely. All right, so talk to me. We have some takeaways here, right? Apply principles like open communication, transparent, and kindness to inform great decision making. Talk to us, and maybe you can, we've heard some great stories about your come up. This decision to turn down a lot of money and go back to business school. Decision to put up with 27 interviews, right? Talk to us about why this makes an individual a better decision maker and how it makes a company make a better decision making as a company.
Sure. I mean, in the book Decide and Conquer, which you referenced up front, I share like 10 different key principles when it comes to decision making. And one of them, I mean, I share a bunch of them, how they apply, but let's say one of them is, be speedy when making a decision. And it's very important not to take forever. People who work for you and they get frustrated. There's a great quote by Teddy Roosevelt who said that the best decisions are great decisions. The next best decisions are bad decisions. And the worst decisions are no decisions. And it's so true, because we've all worked for some people who just took forever to make decisions. And I almost left the entire process, even though I was deeply in love with Meetup, because they were taking so long. So they got lucky, but most people would have just given up and left and said, I'm leaving right now, because of how not speedy they actually were. Talk about transparency, because you mentioned that one, which is very important. So when I was the CEO of Investopedia, I got the opportunity to sit down one-on-one with Jack Welch, the CEO of General Electric, who recently passed away a year or two ago. And I said to him, and he actually was listed as the manager of the entire 20th century by Time Magazine. So he knows a little bit about management. And he said to me, the most important thing you could do, David, is focus on building trust. And the best way to build trust is through transparency, being a transparent leader, radical candor, being honest and open about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Incredibly important. WeWork was not. WeWork was not transparent about a lot of these things. There were ridiculous surprises that ended up happening once I actually took over the role at Meetup and learning about the roles at WeWork. And as a leader, what I've certainly learned is that the best decisions are made when you can be as transparent and honest and open as possible, because everyone finds out everything. The people know. The people
and I'm just curious
know.
to, kind of extend the story.
Yeah.
How did things like when these incredibly, surprises popped up, how did they keep you on board? What was the cost to the company, for both you and other people, right? Because there's a cost that comes to, I know I talk about, I don't want to, bait and switch anybody. I want to make sure everybody's full on the table, because I want people to stay around for the long run. I want people to come in, be happy, I'm in hospitality, right? So happy people create happiness. Dissatisfied, unhappy people create exactly that.
Well, I mean, as a leader, if you're frustrated, you're unhappy about something, you can't wear it on your sleeve. It's nice to say that you should be open about how you feel about things. You can't. And that's why a lot of people are made out to be leaders. And if they do, everyone sees it. And it's extremely difficult to lead an organization if you're constantly portray a situation where you're being frustrated. I was very, very frustrated. We were constantly, but that was behind closed doors. When WeWork said, just different HR policies that they had, or with stock options and what the value was in reality versus the values that they said the reality was. So tremendous amounts of frustrations, but it wouldn't do Meetup any good to hear those frustrations about the parent company coming from me, because then you create an us versus them mentality, which is not healthy for anyone. So I think the way that I dealt with it was I had people that I really trusted at WeWork. The president of WeWork, I was quite close with. He's the person I reported directly to. He was very high integrity, or is a person of very high integrity, and I worked with him. And I kind of avoided Adam for the most part. And I really didn't engage that much with Adam, once I become the CEO of Meetup. In fact, I told Adam that when I first started, actually, I didn't tell Adam. The president of WeWork said to Adam, David doesn't want to talk to you for the first 3 months. And he's like, what? Why? I said, he wants to figure things out, put a plan together, and then present a plan to you. Because I know that he had a lot of opinions about how Meetup should be run and what should happen. And the last thing that I wanted to do was to react to what Adam's plan was. I wanted to create a plan and present it to him. So at one point he called me up like a month and a half and he goes, I know I'm not allowed to speak to you, but I just have a question about something not related to Meetup at all. And I was like, yes, okay, it worked. So sometimes you have to understand when you have to distance yourself from people, and sometimes you have to understand when you want to kind of embrace and find those mentors and people that you trust.
I love that. And because as you were talking, I was thinking, well, who did you vent to? And so you answered that, right? You had some key players. Because
not to my employees ever.
When you talked about like, in the back room, like, well, does that mean you're talking to the wall, right? And that's not healthy.
No.
It's not healthy for the wall, are you, right? At some point that wall is going to break, right? And so I love that piece. And then setting up those boundaries, because I've had a lot of shows where people are taught you got to set those boundaries.
Yes.
And so as a CEO, it's tough, especially in an environment where you're not like, the top of the umbrella. That brings a whole nother set of challenges. And then you're into the world of like, who are your board of directors, who are your informal board of directors that you're reaching out to so you can talk through things. But this idea that, you have people to report to you, you do have people over you. Even if you're the owner of a company, you're beholden. You got a client that provides, 20% of your business, right? That's somebody that, you're going to really want to pay attention to
big time.
when they call, right? And so there's always people. And so I love that piece of it.
Creating what's called your personal board of advisors is very, very important. And at WeWork, what I had was the CEOs of other companies that WeWork owned. They owned a company called Conductor and owned another school called Flatiron School. So all the CEOs got together and we were very close with each other and very vulnerable with each other. And we shared thoughts with each other. And it really helped each of us kind of deal with kind of the craziness or Yiddish, the mishugas, the craziness that was actually happening kind of within the larger WeWork. Because we'd say, how did you communicate this to your employees? And when this happened, what did you do? So we really helped to support each other in a very healthy way.
I love that. And there's a lot of talk in the We Crashed show, kind of goes immediately from like failure as a salesman to, rapid revenue growth and how to like, basically, move fast and break a lot of things and build an organization. But there's not a lot on the community building aspect. And, to build something like that and get everybody on the same board, there's a lot of tequila parties and they're showcasing that, but there's a lot of conversations that happen that aren't so fun for TV, but those are happening in order to get people moving and committed every day and dealing with 27 interviews. We had Alexandria saying, anything you'd approve from the interview process. I have to say, looking back, you say less interviews, right? And a little bit more knowledge and realistic expectations, right? I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Oh yeah, for Alexandria's question. So Alexandria Rosa, thank you for asking the question. So I think that's an easy answer, but I think the better answer is to say that WeWork should have insisted that Meetup nominate 3 or 4 people that could represent the company. And anytime you're making decisions by democracy, that's a bad decision-making process. My book is all about making smart decisions, and weak people need to involve every single person. And people think, oh no, we want to get everyone's buy-in. It's incredibly inefficient to try to get everyone's buy-in. It's incredibly inefficient to wait till every single person agrees to something. So I think getting alignment on who could fully and appropriately represent Meetup as a company would have been much, much better. And would have been very important. The things that they did do well, though, is they had each person ask me questions around a different key leadership topic or area of interest. And they actually then put it all into a big database, and they compared notes and they documented all that. So they did that actually really well. It was just complete and utter overkill. I remember one executive that was hired for Meetup told me that she felt like she was actually worked for the CIA prior to working at Meetup. And she said Meetup's interview process was actually more rigorous than getting in the CIA, which is just, it's just overkill. It's a great way to, and that's why when I joined Meetup, there were 20 people in the human resources department. It's like, we have 20 people in the human resources department. We're losing $20 million. Why? Because there was just this need for perfection, decision-making, this need to make the perfect, and you don't really know. The best way to know, by the way, is actually not interviewing, it's back channeling. It's talking to people whom someone worked with prior, talking to people where I worked at 100 Flowers or Doing Read or Everyday Health or Seeking Alpha or Investopedia, talking to those people, and that you learn a lot more than a 30-minute conversation.
Yeah, and it goes back to the point that you made earlier that volume equals options, right? And so not necessarily volume of interviews, but volume of candidates and having those systems. I mean, I love the piece that they collaborated on the notes, so everybody's on the same page. And so you're not asking the same exact question, hopefully, and what, the feedback. And so you get to be nuanced in your approach. I love it. Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
All right. So, you start talking about setting up, the informal board of directors, and I switched over to this second take. We set yourself up to succeed even before you start by removing potential roadblocks before they become a problem. And I see this as a CEO in my business. This is one of those things that holds me back constantly. Is I know what the future brings, and people will say, well, you can't know the future. Yeah, but I know the past. And I know what's happened in the past. I know what's happened consistently year over year in the past. And somehow still we find ourselves coming into a season not as prepared as we could be. And so it's a failure. I have the crystal ball. I can tell you almost to the date, almost to the right. And still there's a failure. So this, I think, is such an important point for people. Set yourself up to succeed. And you may not have that historical data, but you can reach out to mentors. So talk about,
you learn. Exactly.
So talk to us. Set yourself up to succeed even before you start.
Oh, sure. Okay. So when I first started the job at Meetup, they said, okay, and your first day is going to be Monday. And I said, no, it's not. No, it's not. Because I'm not going to come on my first day, give a presentation to 250 people and know nothing about the company. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to tell the company that my first day is October 27th, but really my first day is going to be October 20th. You're going to start paying me October 20th. And then and then I am going to meet with executives. I'm going to meet with you. I'm going to meet with our founder. I'm going to have a couple of days of meetings prior to starting, so that when I start, I'll have already met with a bunch of people. I've already understood a lot of the different challenges and roadblocks. And that way, when the day one, when people actually ask me, what are my thoughts about A, B, or C, I'll be a lot more informed about things than if I'm just swooped into everything. So the key was to set myself up for success by basically spending a full week immersed in data, immersed in information, talking to, I had 20 different conversations prior to officially starting. And then when I started, I said, okay, here are the 7 big challenges that I think we're facing as a company. And I previewed them with all the other executives. Tell me if you think these resonate with you or don't resonate with you. And they're like, yes, it's so true. We're doing too many things, number 1. We're losing too much money, number 2, whatever those things happen to be. And I said, okay, I'm not going to figure this out because I don't know enough about Meetup, but we're going to build a process, and you all are going to help us to figure out the answers to these 7 questions. So we're going to deprioritize everything you're working on for the next 2 weeks. Every person here who wants to can be part of a work stream, a 7 to 12 person team working on the answers to each of these different key strategic questions. Every single day you're going to meet for an hour or 2. I'm going to check in. And at the end of 2 weeks, I want to hear your recommendations about these 7 questions. And that's what we did. And the company was galvanized, and people that were working in engineering started working on strategy, and people working in marketing were working in, thinking about product. And it was these cross-functional teams that we created. And there was a whole bunch of recommendations. And then I just really listened to like 90% of the recommendations because they were all like a lot of sacred cows. There were a lot of sacred cows there that people always knew were the wrong things to do, but they didn't, there was no opportunity to actually stand up and say it. But I created a mechanism and a process to actually stand up and say those
Emotion
things.
is such a hard thing in business, and we don't think of people being tied to things emotionally in business, but there's no way
Oh my
around
God.
it, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Tons of emotion, tons of emotion. And also, in terms of the founder, we moved the founder to be chairman, and he took a 3-month break, which also gave me the room to be able to make changes without having a person who was the founder of the company kind of, not consciously trying to, differ in opinion, but gave me an opportunity to have space as well and boundaries there. Boundaries from Adam Newman, boundaries from the founders, and empowering people to figure things out. And we did. We made a lot of big decisions, and ultimately, the company was losing $20 million under WeWork in 2019. Pandemic hit, which made it very interesting to run a company called Meetup when you couldn't meet up in person. And in 2020,
Tell me about it.
yeah, 2020, we ended up making $3 million. So we ended up having, during the pandemic, a $21.5 million swing, in profit in a positive way. So, the pandemic, I know we're wrapping up soon, but pandemic was, it still is more a challenging situation for companies all about getting together in person. First, we saw in China, all of our events kind of decline by 95% literally overnight. And then started in Italy, then the US. And I got everyone together as a company. And I said, I know we're all about IRL. I know we're all about in real life. We're all about meeting in person. Is that all we're about? Or are we really about connections? Because we have to ask the question of whether or not we're going to allow for virtual meetup events and virtual meetup groups. We had prohibited virtual meetup groups. We had rejected tens of millions of dollars in saying no to virtual meetup groups in the past. And we got everyone together and I said, okay, we're about connections. People need connecting more than any other time. Since that time, since March of 2020, we've had over 4 million online virtual events. Over 40 million people have participated in those online events, RSVP to those events. And virtual is here to stay. But thank God, people love getting back together in person. We're up to now 80%, a little over 80% back to in person globally, and the United States a little bit higher. And in Florida and Texas is like 98% because COVID never really hit those places, I guess.
So yeah, because Texas and Florida are different beasts, right? So talk to me about this, because being in charge of a company is like coming in and becoming the general manager or the head coach of a baseball team. And so immediately, and because I love what you were talking about, right? Setting this up, getting some buy-in from the key players, making this is not going to be my first day. Let me get some headwind here. Let me build up some steam. Let me prepare for these challenges before they come. But at some point, you take on the lead, and so now your decisions are going to be judged. They're going to be played back in people's minds, whether it was a success or not. CEOs often get kicked to the curb. It's a little bit easier than the public spotlight of a popular baseball team or football team or basketball team, but still, 1 quarter earnings not being what they need to be, challenges, human resources, something off the rails, right? People are saying, all right, so there's a lot of pressure on these decisions that you have to make. So what is your advice to people in terms of being a bold, decisive leader and not succumbing to that fear, right? That analysis paralysis. If I don't make a decision, they can't judge it, right?
Yeah. I would just say that the number one piece of advice with just very little time left is to say that everyone has decision-making biases. There are 4 very common biases that people most exhibit. Understand how you are biased, because it's not a question of whether or not you're biased. You are very biased as a decision maker, just like I am, just like everyone else is. So the 4 most common biases are recency bias, which is overemphasizing what just happened recently, which is a big issue for a lot of people. The next is sunk cost fallacy, which is not appreciating how much time you put into something and and basically trying to make up for the fact you didn't waste your time, but really it's a sunk cost, it's past. Confirmation bias, which is surrounding yourself by people that just want to confirm what you believe in, and status quo bias, which is the bias towards the status quo as opposed to and fear of change. So I would say best advice I would give is understand your decision-making biases, understand where you are, think back to where you made some mistakes around each of those 4 biases, and then that way you could course correct if you have awareness around them. And if you want to learn more about some of the crazy stories, or check out the book Decide and Conquer, and hopefully send me a LinkedIn invite, and hopefully it can help you in your decision-making path, and it'll be entertaining as well.
And it's not a Biz Dev Live if I don't mute myself one time, right? So this has been amazing. You're awesome. I appreciate you sharing all of the stories. I think there's so much to learn in it. I encourage people to check out the book, Decide and Conquer. The cover's there. You can buy it on Amazon. You can go to David's website, connect with him on LinkedIn. And David, just for people out there that, want to get involved with you, want to get more involved with Meetup, what should they do?
Okay. So download the app. iOS or Android app. You go on the website, sure, but download the app and go to a first Meetup event if you've never been to one. If you went to one 5 years ago or 10 years ago, go to a Meetup event again. We have everything. Anything you could possibly imagine, we have it. And you'll meet people that you never would have met earlier. And I think it will enrich your life. I hope it'll enrich your life, and you will have an opportunity to enrich the life of other people as well. So that's the best thing in my mind to do. In terms of me personally, reach out on LinkedIn. I love meeting people and staying in touch with people. If I publish something or if I get feedback, a way to connect, you can send me an email at david@meetup.com. But I would say LinkedIn is a great way to stay in touch. So, let's do it.
And I'll give the heartfelt, man, you're a good dude. Thank you so much for being on the show, sharing your story. I know that it's going to help people, impact people. Thanks for being somebody that wants to change the world in a positive way. With that, I'll place off with a Biz Dev Live theme. I'll give you the last word, David.
Okay, what I would say is the thing that I try to always tell people about is my high school yearbook quote. My son just graduated from high school, so I can give my quote from my high school yearbook in 1992, which is, sometimes in our pursuit of happiness, it's important to pause and just be happy, and not always think about future happiness, but try to find ways of having joy in the everyday.
Love it.
Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live. Weekdays at 11 Eastern Time, live. Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live. Weekdays at 11 Eastern Time. Leadership and motivation, empathy and inspiration, Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live. Business development, not even selling it. Biz D with C, brought to you by Cameron T. Biz D with C, brought to you by Cameron T. This is business development, not even selling it. This is business development, not even selling it. Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live.